Hi, my name is Ashley Strand. Welcome to the very first episode of the New Hanover Action Team. This Thursday, January 26th at 7 p.m. at the GOP headquarters, the New Hanover County Republican Party will select a new Register of Deeds for New Hanover County. Now, I teased this show with a very large claim that the current GOP leadership needs to be held accountable for a pattern of repudiating the will of its own voter base, or as I would call it, the grassroots. Now, the controversy surrounding the upcoming selection of the new Register of Deeds is part of that pattern. Here to discuss this issue and the larger trend in depth is the leader of the New Hanover County Concerned Citizens, Diane Zaricki. Diane, welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Good to be here.
Thank you for coming. Now, before we start, I just want to say something on a personal note. The moment that I got truly bought in all the way to New Hanover County politics, and I think I've told you this personally, but I think it's worth repeating here, is when I came into your meeting at the Carolina Seafood and Barbecue on a Wednesday evening, sometime in the depths of winter last year. We all stood up and we said the Pledge of Allegiance together, and we said a prayer together. And the energy that was in that room just electrified me. And I think all of this is about getting people who are into the community into the rooms where we take the actions that end up shaping our local governments. And you are absolutely the paragon of that model in this community. So I just want to thank you for that up top.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's dive right into it. So Kimberly Phillips, she placed second in the 2020 GOP primary for Register of Deeds. Republican Tammy T. Beasley, who was an incumbent, I believe, won in the general, but then she vacated her office. So what is the standard procedure for filling an office like Register of Deeds?
So statute provides that the GOP, since she was a Republican Register of Deeds, has 30 days to name her replacement. She left office December 30th, which gives us until January 29th to put a name up to the county commission, who will appoint that candidate as the replacement for the remainder of her term.
Okay. Now, remind me, did Pete Wildeboer get in to the Board of Education originally by being
Yes.
appointed by? Okay. And so how did that work? Why was he selected?
So that was in 2020 when we had a vacant GOP school board education seat. They primarily selected him because he had run for office, same as we're looking at the Kimberly Phillips situation this year. And he was placed in without actually forming a nominating committee or even taking a vote of the executive committee. So the GOP in that instance just put him up and put him into that seat, which I think is pretty typical, actually. What you're going to look for is someone who's willing to serve, and your candidates who have ran in the past are probably a really good place to start.
Yeah, so that's my impression, that a lot of the the reason people are upset about the fact that this is a process to choose this nominee is that we had someone who had run for the office and came in second in the primary. Is that a convention or a custom to appoint the second place finisher in the primary?
It is an option they have. I mean, I don't think it's inappropriate to form a committee. This is a paid position, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a substantial salary. Now, county commission sets the salary, but it's between like $100,000 and $125,000 a year. So you don't want some amateur coming in and running the Register of Deeds office, right? I mean, so I think the appropriate place to start, at least, would be with the one who ran in the primary a couple of years back. If they want to put it out for bid, fine, take other applications. But in the situation we're dealing with today, they didn't even interview her.
So let's just take a look at her real quickly, because what it sounds like to me is that in the absence of a compelling reason to consider someone else instead of her, there has to be some compelling reason not to consider her. Let's just look at her really quickly. Her name is Kimberly Phillips. And I checked out, this is from Port City Daily, December 9th, 2019. This is from when she was running. Phillips is a longtime Wilmington resident who has worked in the Register of Deeds office for almost 10 years. She was formerly the senior assistant to Tammy Beasley. She has 25 years of customer service experience, including 17 working for New Hanover County. She has received numerous awards for customer service excellence and professionalism, along with firsthand experience, including but not limited to managing the Register of Deeds budget, staff supervision, and being instrumental in the creation of the Love is in the Air and the Fireworks of Love free wedding events, and the startup of the Register of Deeds satellite office located at the New Hanover County Government Center. So it kind of sounds like she's, she couldn't have better job experience for it. Exactly. She was involved in the major. Yeah. So I think that's probably where the, we're calling this controversy. That's probably why people are confused as to why she's not being considered. Are you aware of any other candidates who've been put forward at any time, who've been suggested or?
Yes, so we've heard a couple names, and it is a little concerning. Their qualifications just pale in comparison to Kimberly. Mm-hmm. One of them currently works for the Register's office under Tammy, or did under Tammy. Tammy's no longer there. Sure. But she's only been there a couple years, and I mean, I'm just going to call it like it is. She worked at Wendy's prior to, and is 26 years old, and up until 2 years ago, Democrat. So I mean, we're dealing with a lifelong Republican who has run for office, has served 10 years as, the assistant to 2 of our Register of Deeds. And I'm in receipt of 11 recommendation letters for her. One of them, in fact, being from the prior Register of Deeds that she worked under, saying that she would just, there's no other candidate in mind. This is Rebecca Bryant. I'm pleased that after having served myself as New Hanover County Register of Deeds for 20 years, that I now have the opportunity to recommend you appoint Kimberly as registrar. I have personally known Kimberly for 18 years, with almost 5 of those years working directly under me as my administrative assistant at the Register of Deeds, and I can assure you that she has every attribute it takes to be a qualified and competent Register of Deeds. She further says, appointing Kimberly as Registers of Deeds is the best, in all caps, decision your committee will ever make. I tell you that with 100% certainty. Now, this is a prior Register of Deeds. She was her personal assistant. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got lawyers stepping up who have worked with her at the office in that capacity, and they're saying it's been a nightmare since she left, and they are 100% wanting her back. We've got employees that she worked with saying it's gone downhill after she left, and they want her appointed. It's just, to me, it is unfathomable that you are not going to interview this candidate who is, I mean, by far the most qualified for that position. It's just, when things don't make sense, you have to take it further back and say, what is the motive behind these actions? And when you've got educated people serving on the executive committee saying, let's interview. Now, I will say that they did call her last Friday, and she did interview with them today. But it's because of the pressure the grassroots put on that.
That's interesting.
That's the beauty of the grassroots, because we will expose what happens.
Yes, absolutely. Right? And sorry, just to break in, I think that probably that chain of events probably started with the most recent New Hanover County Women's Republican Club, Republican Women's Club meeting. where Kimberly
Yes.
showed up and she made her case, and people were pretty outraged to find out that she wasn't even under consideration. So, for her to be considered at this late stage in the game, given that we're, 3-4 days from the deadline, seems like they're covering.
We have to decide in 2 days. The executive committee's reconvening on Thursday evening.
Mm-hmm. So great. So there's just a couple things I wanted to pick up on that you said, a couple questions that occurred to me. One of the things is that it's interesting. First of all, she's incredibly well credentialed. She has exactly the right experience, the on-job experience and the in-community lived experience that you would want from someone in this position. And I noticed just from reading a little bit on her background is that the accomplishments that she pointed to during her tenure as Tammy Beasley's assistant were the same exact accomplishments that Tammy Beasley pointed to. It's interesting to me that has Tammy recommended her, or was there, that the two were running against one another? Was there conflict there? Is there something under the surface here?
Yes. Short answer is
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
When she was working for Tammy, Tammy actually terminated her because she felt that she was going to run against her, and she was a little intimidated by that.
Uh-huh.
There was a lawsuit that ensued, and Kimberly Phillips ultimately won the wrongful termination suit, but she basically terminated her to get her out of office so that she wouldn't compete against her for the Register of Deeds position. But that has been verified that she did win that lawsuit, and there's a little bit of contention between the two ladies as far as that's concerned. So
it's hard to tease out probably what was going on there. I mean, we can speculate on what it was, but I don't think that's exactly what we want to aim at right now. But as you were saying, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is on top of everything, her qualifications and the recommendations and all that, we also have to think about 5,855 New Hanover County voters voted for this woman, and surely their voices should be considered. So you were starting to say, you have to look at why they would overlook this candidate. And perhaps by way of answering that, and again, this is something that we'll probably have to mostly speculate on, but they're questions worth asking. Why is the Register of Deeds office itself so important?
Well, I mean, they control all the property transfers and deeds and land and maps and, all of these things inside the county. And we are a highly real estate run county. All right. And when we talk about, these positions and why they're being overlooked, I'm going to take it one step further. When we had our executive committee in December and we tried this little appointing of the replacement, that meeting didn't go so well. The GOP had switched it over to a non-voting meeting, and they just wanted to give the reports because they knew that Kimberly was going to be nominated from the floor, and they hadn't interviewed her. So there was a little bit of contention.
I just want to draw that out. So you're saying that the GOP leadership specifically used procedural methods to block her appointment. So it's not just that they've left her off the table. They blocked her appointment using procedural tools. Okay, I just wanted to note that. I think that's important to say. Yes, go on.
Yeah, it is important to say. It's also important, I think, to point out that they formed a nominating committee of 5 individuals that were on the nominating committee to bring the name of the person they wish to nominate forward. Well, one of those people worked for Tammy Beasley. We're going to call her Tammy Piver now. Her name used to be Beasley. But it ended up that individual was not even a registered Republican, serving on the nominating committee for the GOP. So in that December meeting, that got brought up as well, and they immediately had to remove her because we had someone serving for the GOP that was not a Republican, which was quite disturbing to about every executive committee member in the room.
Yeah, well, so I think what we're trying it's like one more thing in the bucket, right? that, it's kind of like seeing a roach in your kitchen floor and going, well, it's only one. When you see the one, it makes you think, well, how much other stuff is getting that is not appropriate, going from not following the bylaws or not following convention or custom, all the way up to and including potentially, criminal stuff, stuff that violates.
Well, and then, they're concerned that there's divisiveness inside the party at this point. But, when people are hiding things and lying, it's almost like being in a bad marriage. I mean, you have trusting and standing behind your party when you've got, some establishment GOP who's trying to do things the old way they used to do things. And now you actually have concerned citizens, for lack of a better term, grassroots people who are concerned, not only what's going on in our county, what's going on in our nation and world, that, these things aren't working and they're getting us into bad predicaments. But, when you see disloyalty on the GOP's part, unfortunately, backing, candidates that aren't ours or pushing certain, it's just, it leaves the people going to search out more truth, and they're going to get louder and stronger on a daily basis. And that is what's happening in our county. I mean, the people are not going to let them get away with this any longer. I mean, we're talking about elected officials, we're talking about paid positions, and you're going to place unqualified people in them when one of the nominating committee has full well admitted that she is by far the most, qualified candidate. I mean, it's not even in the same realm of possibility. But you want to push up other names of people, what is the underlying reason that you do not want the most qualified candidate? I own a business. You've owned a business. If I got her resume sent over with the job description that I put out there, she would be in my office within 5 minutes. The next day, if I could get her there, right? I mean, that is somebody you call in for an interview immediately.
Right. And so let me ask you this. Just to get specific on it, are you willing to speculate? So to me, it sounds like if you get a young, unqualified person who's new to the party, maybe related to someone who's in the party, something like this, and you get someone who's highly unqualified, what you're looking for is someone that you can control. Is there a set of policies that you think are being aimed at by local moneyed interests, probably in real estate? Is there a set of policies that you think they're aiming at, a set of developments? Can you speculate, or you just have a general feeling that they want someone they can control?
I'm not going to speculate on what their end goal is.
Okay.
I just know that this process is very suspicious.
Okay, well, so pick up on that. That's the next question I wanted to ask. In general, why is it so important for us to hold the GOP leadership to following the bylaws, to following custom and convention, and just observing transparency and straightforwardness? I mean, it seems obvious, but go ahead and answer it for us.
Well, it's their rules, it's their regulations, it's their bylaws, and those are written just like the Constitution of the United States to protect the people, right? I don't care if it's the county level or if it's the state level or if it's the federal Constitution. But when you start messing with the plans that were put in place so that the proper procedures are followed, so that we do get the results that we need, the county GOP is on the same, set of plan of organization. And you can easily go online and access them and read them. And just last week, they tried changing the plan of organization again outside of our annual convention, which is a violation of the plan of organization. We called them out on it. They have removed it from the agenda for this Thursday. Thank goodness. But we don't have the authority as the executive committee to do that. And when you see people trying to manipulate the rules and laws, we can only assume, and I'm not going to speculate as to what it is, but they're trying to push their own agendas through that fall outside of the confines of what they're restricted to in their governing documents.
Absolutely.
And it is that simple.
And ultimately what it comes down to is they're changing a democratic procedure into an oligarchic institution. In other words, they're putting,
Yes.
they're supposed to, my understanding of the GOP's role generally is to support the will of the GOP electorate. Now obviously there's a space for people who are experts in certain areas and can give guidance on things that most people don't understand. Mm-hmm. But again, it would seem to me that the bent of that would be to share information with people and say, well, it seems like you'd want to do X, but really the smart thing to do is Z, instead of just doing all of as much stuff as they can behind the heiress as they can. Now, I just want to finish up with this Kimberly Phillips stuff so we don't lose too much focus, because we do have action items based on this. Now, but you're saying there have been some good developments. They went ahead and interviewed Kimberly Phillips. That seems to have been a response to some pressure. What are the other good developments or recent developments that we've had in this case leading up to Thursday?
Well, I don't know of many other, and I don't know, I'm not confident that they're still going to put forward that name on Thursday evening.
Okay.
We did send out a video this morning as to how the meeting was to be run, and we were instructed on how, if we wanted to do that, it was going to be accepted. There are limitations in that. I'm going to further review that, and we'll have, conversations up until the Thursday evening meeting with the nominating committee to see, where we're going to end up with this. I think that they did what they did because of the pressure they were feeling, but I am not confident that we're going to get the end result at this point that we clearly want and desire. So we're going to have people get involved and, let them know how many people are aware of what they're doing, so that, that they will be held accountable if they do this. But, the sad reality is, if the GOP does not put a name forward, we are leaving that up to county commission to decide who replaces our register of deeds, which cannot happen.
Right.
So, there's a lot at stake here.
Yes, absolutely. And just to be clear for everyone, they're controlled by Democrats. So the likelihood is that they would appoint a Democrat. So and the whole point of the statute of if the elections are run with parties, is that the parties are given the opportunity to replace their own winner with someone else from their own party. Right. And so why you wouldn't exercise
in the event
this?
of a vacancy, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And this is not an uncommon thing, right? We've got the same thing projected to go on with the sheriff in the next year or so, because, he's saying he's stepping down before his term is up. And so what they do, Ashley, is they use that as an opportunity to place someone in there, and then that person can run as an incumbent, and they believe that they've held office previously, and they're more likely to win in the next election.
I see. Okay. Yeah. No. So I'm glad we identified that pattern. This is a bit of sleight of hand of local politics, which is someone leaves early and then their replacement is an incumbent when they run. And again, so I think we're building a case, and every time we see an example of it, we can point to, okay, here's another example of where they've excluded the voters. This is really anti-democratic behavior at its base. What is the action you have specifically planned for Thursday night to show the displeasure of the base in the attempt to block Ms. Phillips?
Well, so up until Thursday, what we would like to see is everybody emailing our executive board at the GOP that they are aware that Kimberly Phillips is the most qualified candidate, and they're encouraging them to do the right thing and to put her name up for election. In a perfect world, they would have interviewed her today and they would have agreed that she's the most qualified, even though they could clearly tell that by seeing the resume and the letters of recommendations. And mind you, she's the only candidate out of 18 of them. I don't know how many interviewed in full. I do not have that number. 18 applicants. She is the only one who actually brought a budget forward and wanted to discuss that with the board in her interview, which I thought was pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
Zero others did. Okay?
Yeah.
But she knows the score, right? And so in a perfect world, my hope is that the people get involved. let them know how many. No, the executive committee, by all means, is communicated in discussing how we're going to handle the Thursday meeting if they do not do this.
So the meeting's closed. Are you planning to do anything before the meeting?
Yes, we are.
Tell me about that.
Everybody's going to meet outside. Every patriot is welcome to come to that. There will be people outside. Kimberly Phillips herself will be there, and she will be outside with her resume and her letters of recommendation, kind of asking the executive committee, to nominate her from the floor and get her votes too. So, it'll be, an exciting evening to say the least. But yeah, we're asking for people. I mean, if you're interested in it, show up and show your support, for replacing this register of deed.
All right. So you know what you just queued up?
What did I queue up? There you go.
You queued up the NHCA action team action items. Okay. So the first action item we have tonight is come show up to the GOP at 829 South Kerr Avenue, Thursday, January 26, 6 to 7 p.m. I say 6 to 7 p.m. because the meeting itself is closed. So is that a good time frame for people to show up?
Yeah. The meeting starts at 7. So we're asking everybody to come between 6 and 6:30. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So 6 to 6:30, 829 South Kerr Avenue, Thursday night. Be there, meet the candidate, show your support for a democratic, transparent, and I mean, goodness, how hard is it to ask for a by-the-book process where we're not having to constantly go around behind the GOP leadership and, play this game of, trying to catch them with their hands in the cookie jar. It's just outrageous. But here's the other action item. Save the date, March 21. That's the GOP convention. Invite friends and family. And then the third one is going to be register as a Republican by January 31st. Register as a Republican by January 31st. I think what you're talking about here is a leadership that is shown itself not to be reliable, to actually have an adversarial relationship with its voting base. And we actually have a great opportunity to change that leadership come the 21st. So if anyone's going to come out on Thursday, then that many more people have to come out on the 21st. We're going to talk about that in just a second. I thought since Will was so nice as to send it to us, I would go ahead and show this little video that he sent out. What I think is interesting about this video is what is not said in it. So here we go. We're just going to pop this up here real quick. So this is called How We Will Recommend a Candidate for Register of Deeds. Okay, see you January 26th, indeed. It is January 26th, right? Or is it January 27th? January 26th at 7 p.m. Now, okay, just right off the bat, this is, can you guess what my favorite screenshot from this is?
Yes.
It pretty much sums up the whole theme of the night, doesn't it? Listen, the interesting thing about this video is that it's framed as a very responsible thing, right? We're following the rules. Here's the law that says this, and here's the procedure, and we're following Robert's rules, so everything will be nice and smooth. And so, I'm not going to completely fault the thing, but what's interesting to me really about this video is what's missing from it, right? So, what were the criteria that were used to choose the nominating committee? I mean, to me, what it says is, so one person just selects his hand-picked crew. So Will Connect picked the nominators, yes. and it's fine for them to say, well, this is the procedure, but I don't really think that's the question that the electorate is interested in, right? It's, well, how do we choose these people? What is their expertise? What is their set of interests? It's okay to have interests, but do you at least have competing interests represented in this nominating committee? And this is completely opaque. What criteria did they use to choose the candidates? Also completely opaque. What is at stake in this office? Not shared. So the tone of the whole thing is, listen, guys, we got it covered. And I think it's very typical of how they operate, which is to say, hey, trust us. And if you do, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And they've chosen someone, right? But we don't know who that nominee is, do we?
No.
Okay.
No, and I sincerely believe that they will not put that name forward until the meeting Thursday evening. And, that's one of the issues the executive committee has as well. We weren't even given the names of the applicants, so we could do our research on them, right? Well, I mean, tell us who applied, who did you interview, what was the criteria, and how did we get to where we are today? Yes, It's fine. You have a nominating committee as long as they're transparent. Yeah. And, when we asked the credentials, one of them was experience. One of them was that they're going to be willing to run for election again, which, it's like, if you set their credentials down, though, we know who checks all the boxes, but we also know whose name they don't want to put up. So when you want to talk about lack of transparency and trust and unity among the party, this is why. Yeah. This is 100% so
to me, the biggest thing that's missing from this preparatory video is time. Mm-hmm. I mean, this video was disseminated on January 24th for a selection process that's going to be take place on the 26th for a deadline that comes up on the 30th. And there is zero time to get to know the candidate. Zero time.
Well, clearly that's purposeful, but we're supposed to vote someone into that office, right?
Yep.
In 2 days. What are we voting on? We lack the information to be able to make an educated vote.
Because now let's talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you won't put up the name that you're bringing forward so we can do research on that person, we already know you've had a non-Republican on the nominating committee.
Right.
Right? And you want to bring a 26-year-old Democrat up, as a viable replacement for the Register of Deeds when 2 years ago she was a Democrat her whole life.
Yeah. And also there's no explanation for why they're not doing it the way they would normally do it. They don't mention the convention that you appoint the person who got the second most number of votes in the primary. Let me ask you about this because it seems like you're sort of getting around to this voting issue. What do you think about this? Why this way? It seems to me, so we consider one name at a time. Votes are not split among multiple candidates. What's your reaction to that? This idea of votes not being split among multiple candidates. That seems like one of those messy, like.
When I see that, having been present in these meetings and seen what they try, and so, you know, we have taken this to a parliamentarian for review, right?
Yeah.
To see if this is proper, in fact, because, you know, at the last meeting in December, they wouldn't let us nominate from the floor, which we can do in any meeting. You can always file a motion for anything, and they squashed it saying it was a non-voting meeting, which they switched at the last minute to non-voting so that we couldn't vote for a replacement because they knew that there was some kickback coming. So what I see has happened here is that the GOP has been operating on their own, you know, path for decades, you know, and it's just, you know, we question, you know, nobody's held them accountable. And after the 2020 election, people woke up. They realized that we do not have secure elections, and we have to question our candidates. We're looking at all the rhinos out there who are hurting the party, and we have to take a look. And people started vetting candidates better, and people started being concerned, showing up and speaking. And quite frankly, I'm privileged to have one of those organizations who's willing to do that, because the questions need to be answered. And I'm sorry, GOP, if you don't like the questions, but there are ways that this is supposed to be run, and they are to protect the people. And when we see things not being done that way, the people have a right to be upset. They have a right to speak. And, you know, the fact, more so than that last screen that you showed me, the one that concerned me was they're limiting the times a name can be brought forward during that meeting to 2. So why can we only strike a name and put her up twice? And what is their plan for that process? Because I can assure you, they like to be, you know, 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And they've been planning the format of this meeting for weeks now. Glad you interviewed her, but you didn't reach out to her till last Friday. Glad you brought her in this afternoon, you know, but what is this? What is this nominating committee?
Yeah, it sounds like, to me, the procedure looks like exactly what you say. Is it's meant to, it reminds me of the convention from last year, where it felt like the will of the people there was overridden by some sleight of hand using Robert's rules, whether they were being used correctly or not. But, you know, the one instance I remember was where the guy that Will brought in from out of town to run the whole show wouldn't move to strike Randy's motion or resolution because he didn't want us to be opened up to being sued for having used the word communist. Why the GOP is trying to avoid using the word communist, especially when that describes exactly what Randy was complaining about, is hard to figure out. But it was palpable, the sense in that room of people feeling like they were just getting, you know, railroaded. And to me, this whole setup looks like, you know, okay, you're going to get someone up there one time, but you can't put them up multiple times. Once they're voted down, they're out, you know, to keep the discussion orderly. And votes are not split among multiple candidates, allows all voices to be heard. Well, that assumes that everyone who wants to say something about someone before the discussion moves on from them has the opportunity to do that. But clearly the procedure doesn't allow for that. And I don't know anything about parliamentary procedures, but it's pretty obvious to me, you know, that there's some sort of gamesmanship going on there.
So, and let me point out the other thing that happens during these meetings, right? To be orderly, you need to raise your hand if you want to discuss something, right?
Yes.
And they limit the time for the pro candidate and the anti candidate, right?
Okay.
So who has the right to call on who speaks?
Right. And then you're being disorderly if you get ignored and say, hey, I've had my hand up for X amount of time. So they're giving themselves a lot of ways.
What's coming out of that person's mouth, if it isn't necessarily what they want to hear, you don't get called on, right?
And so here's
controlled
exactly.
setting.
So obviously they've set up a lot of ways to corral this in the way they want it to go. And they may, anyway, so I think we've made that point. And the last thing I think they left out is, and is important to reiterate, is they don't say what happens. They say, okay, there's going to be one person left at the end of this process, and then it's going to be a simple majority vote. But what they don't say is what happens if that person doesn't get a simple majority.
Yeah,
and I think
that's a possibility.
And then it goes to the commissioners, I suppose.
Yeah, which is a scary thought, and that looks really terrible for the party.
Well,
I mean, if you have an executive committee who can't agree on the most qualified candidate, that's a business decision. I mean, and we're not playing on a level field here. I mean, we are talking about, we know who the most qualified person is.
Right.
And if we're going to entertain an inexperienced, uneducated, unaccredited person to fill this spot when that person sits there, it is awful. It's awful for the party. And it gets even more concerning because precinct chairs have a vote on the executive committee. Every precinct chair, there are 43 precincts in New Hanover County. So those 43 people, if those seats are all filled, there are 43 votes. They come to the meeting and they can vote. Well, as of last summer, they started hiding the precinct chairs from the executive committee, and they would not tell us who those people were, and they were replacing them, having people resign, asking them to step down, qualified people who lived in the precinct, and then they were replacing them with their own appointments, who by the plan of organization need to be voted into office within 60 days by a special executive committee meeting as well, and that was not happening. So we're not even sure that we have qualified voters sitting on the executive committee.
So
we took it to the state last week, and the state said release them, and we did get a copy of apparently the current, precinct chair list, but that has been withheld for almost 6 months now.
Okay, good.
So we don't know who our voters are.
I'm glad you're getting into this. Let's just wrap up the Register of Deeds thing. I think we're looking at this as one example of tremendous way in which the GOP leadership has failed. And this is, again, all aiming towards March 21st. And really, you and I and other grassroots people in the community, it's our job to build the case that there's a problem and that it needs to be fixed, and then to offer a solution. So just to drive home the point, they can't even, think about how much money we spend fighting Democrats in the elections. This committee, this leadership can't get itself together to appoint a Republican, and they just give an office to the Democrats. It's astonishing. It's an astonishing failure. So, what I want to transition to now is we've set the table of the GOP is not responding to the desires of its voter base. They're acting as an oligarchic, exclusionary organization. They're hiding. They're breaking bylaws, in some cases, perhaps statutes. There's malfeasance going on. And so this is now the time for us to start to lay out that case. So that was part one of my conversation with Diane Zaricki, leader of the New Hanover County Concerned Citizens. Next week, we'll be back with part two, where we will give you an overview of all the reasons we need to change the leadership of the GOP. And we need to put up an alternative slate to the slate that the leadership is going to put up. That is how we will take back control of our party. That is how we will take back control of our county. I will leave you with your action items. Thank you for watching. And remember, as always, the time for action is now.